Welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am delighted to be with you on another Tuesday, bringing you another author interview. As we get started, I want to remind you, as I do at the beginning of every episode, to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help the algorithm. It helps get the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. If you want to help the podcast in another way, this not only helps the podcast, but the network as a whole, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info and leave a tip or a donation. While you're doing that, if you want to leave a question or a comment, you can do that as well. I would love to engage with those questions and or comments at the beginning of the next episode after I receive them. Love hearing from followers of the podcast. So again, if you want to support the podcast and the network as a whole in another way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info, as you are seeing in the video playing next to me, to leave a tip or a donation. And as always, thank you so much for the support you give in whatever form that support comes in. As we get started, how is your week going? It is a holiday week, so maybe you get some extra time off. Here, of course, it's just Thursday. It's the 4th of July, but it's also just Thursday. There's no celebrations because it's not a Portuguese holiday. We'll probably go to the pool or go for another, our usual walk or something. We'll do something to celebrate. Speaking of the pool, I'm not sure if you can hear, there's a family staying in the Airbnb next door to us, and they're out at the pool right now, and I can hear them splashing around, having a lot of fun. Earlier, the splashing was accompanied by a very vigorous rendition of Let It Go from the Frozen soundtrack. But like many young people I've heard sing that song, they only know the Let It Go part. They don't really know too many other words, but it was being sung with great enthusiasm and much accompanying splashing, so I was enjoying it very much. But hopefully they're having a good time down at the pool. Today I have a returning author. Mary Keliikoa has been on the podcast. I keep saying 3 times. No, I keep saying that this is her 3rd time. No, this is her 4th time on the podcast. See, I didn't even get it right that time when I said it. She has been on the podcast 3 other times. This is her 4th appearance. I love having her on. Let me give you the episodes that she's already been on in case you want to backtrack and listen to any of the previous interviews, learn more about her other books. So the first time she was on was October 26th of 2021. Then a year later, November 25th, 2022, and October 31st, 2023. We're a few months early having her on. She interviewed this weekend, so that was June, although her episode is now airing in July. So we're just a little bit earlier than we normally are, but she's been on. This is her 4th time, so I love that. The book is a standalone book. The other times she's been on, we've talked about her series, but this is a standalone book called Don't Ask, Don't Follow, the description of which is as follows. Beth Ralston, a paralegal in Portland, Oregon, would rather be racking up billable hours than mingling at an office party, especially when her sister Lindsay, aka her +1, is a no-show. After making her obligatory rounds, Beth returns to her office to find that her boss, who she'd talked with moments before, has been murdered. She sees a woman fleeing the scene. Wait, was that Lindsay? Unable to catch up to her in time, Beth waits for the police to arrive and notices that Lindsay has left her phone behind with an unsent text message to Beth displayed on the screen. Don't ask, don't follow. Lindsay is unreachable for days, and when Beth starts to come under suspicion for the crime, she decides that waiting is impossible. While retracing Lindsay's steps, determined to bring her home, Beth uncovers what her sister, an investigative reporter bent on changing the world, was trying to expose. Corruption, secrets, and betrayal on an unimaginable level. Revealing the truth might bring back the one person she's desperate to find, but it could also destroy the only life and family Beth's ever known. So that is the description of Don't Ask, Don't Follow. As I mentioned, it is a standalone, and it's suspense. It's got elements of thriller. It is fast moving. Really enjoyed it. It's not, you know me. big wimp when it comes to these sorts of things, but this one is just, it's good. It's fast paced. There's enough to keep you guessing and engaged, a lot of twists and turns, a lot of family secrets and family drama, some secondary characters that come into play that you're trying to figure out how they all fit in with everything. So really good standalone novel if you are looking for a quick, fun, I mean, you know what I mean when I say fun. It's a suspense, but engaging, quick, keep you guessing book. That's what I mean by quick. Like, it keeps you engaged and you want to keep reading to get through to find out what happens. And then you should definitely check this one out. But let's go ahead and turn now to the interview with Mary so she can tell you more about the book. Again, it is called Don't Ask, Don't Follow. The author is Mary Keliikoa. Hi, Mary. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I think this is your third time on the podcast. First time, though, that we actually get to see each other. So that is fun.
That is. It's different.
Yeah. For people who might not have seen or heard the other interviews, could you just introduce yourself briefly, maybe even as a refresher for people who did hear those?
Yeah, so I'm Mary Keliikoa, and I'm the author of a couple of series, the Kelly Pruitt series, which is what I debuted with, and the Misty Pines mystery series. It features a small town sheriff. And then my latest book is Don't Ask, Don't Follow, which is my first standalone domestic suspense. I live in the Pacific Northwest, born and raised in Portland, Oregon, but now I live across the river in Washington. Been married for 35 years and spend a lot of time in the garden these days because I'm officially retired from the day job and writing full time now. And yeah, do a lot of traveling. I'm a big traveler, and I spend most of my days gardening, writing, and coming up with the next place to escape to.
Sounds good.
Including Hawaii, which I also go to quite often.
Yes, yeah. And now that I'm doing video and I can see people, I can see your spaces. I like the lime green wall behind you. Was that hard to choose a lime green color for is it an accent wall or?
No, the whole office is that color.
Wow.
I wanted something bright so that when I walked in, it's where I do all my creating. So I wanted to have a nice bright space. But it's so covered with, positive things and photos and book canvases that, you don't see a lot of the wall these days.
Sure.
It makes a nice, backdrop to the art pieces, though.
Yeah, so. No, I like it. I'm terrible about choosing colors. I sort of freeze with too many choices sometimes.
Yeah, I think this one's called Grasshopper or something like that. It's kind of cool.
That's I want that to be my next job. I want to name paint colors or fingernail polish color.
Exactly. Could be very creative.
Yes. Let's talk about books instead.
Okay.
This is, as you said, your first standalone novel. It's called Don't Ask, Don't Follow. Can you give an overview of the story?
Yeah, so the story is really about two sisters at the end of the day. Beth Ralston is the little sister who is a paralegal who works in her father's law firm, and Lindsay Ralston is her big sister, who is an investigative reporter. And she's supposed to be Beth's plus one for the evening at a holiday party in the office, but she never shows. And that's not unusual. Lindsay's a little bit of a wild child, and Beth is kind of the serious one. And so she's done with the party at a certain point and she heads out. But on her way back to her office, she sees Lindsay running out the back door. She's a little miffed because she didn't even get a text that she'd arrived. And but she's unable to catch up with her. When she comes back, she's thinking, I'll ask my boss, since he was in his office, and see if Lindsay was looking for me. Unfortunately, she finds her boss murdered. And when she goes back to her office, she finds a note from Lindsay that says, don't ask and don't follow. Now, don't ask is something she's heard her whole life because she's the little sister and big sister's always doing something. But don't follow usually comes out when Lindsay's up to something she shouldn't be doing. And Beth has to decide very quickly whether she's going to cover for her sister or not, because the detective on the case is in her office within a short period of time. And of course, Beth is going to cover for her sister, and but she's going to try to figure out what's happening, and that's the whole basis of the book.
Yeah. And of course, there's lots happening as she starts getting into things.
Nothing is as it seems.
Yes. As the little sister, I get it. Although my sister is 6.5 years older than I am, so it was less about me covering for her and more about me just being so annoyed that I couldn't do everything that she was doing all the time.
There is that, yes.
Yes. Yeah, it didn't matter that my sister was a teenager and I was, 7 or 8 or however old I was. I still really thought that I should get to do whatever she was doing at the same time that she was doing it. And I was very mad whenever I couldn't. I'm such the youngest child, can you tell? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the inspiration for this book. Sisters, of course, is part of it and that relationship, but we'll be talking more about that initial jumping off point for Don't Ask, Don't Follow. You are listening to and or watching the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with author Mary Keliikoa. Again, we are talking about her standalone novel, Don't Ask, Don't Follow. Before the break, we were talking about sisters and the relationship between sisters. As we get back into this second segment, I do want to remind you just real quick again that if you want to support this podcast in a slightly different way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info and leave a tip or a donation. Again, gsmcpodcast.info. You can leave a tip or a donation that will not only help the GSMC Book Review podcast, but the GSMC Podcast Network as a whole. Thank you, as always, for all of your support. As I said, we were talking about sisters and the relationship between sisters before the break. Let's go ahead and get back to that interview with Mary. So what was your initial inspiration for the story?
Really just diving into the sisters. Now, it's funny, you have a 6.5-year-old sister older. Mine is 13 years older. So
Okay.
I was always looking up to my sister. It was really almost two sets of families in our group. But I really thought that sisterhood is such a deep, complex issue to explore. And when Beth came to me, I just knew that I wanted to really dive into who she was, or who she thought she was, and what sisters would do for each other to protect each other. And also, I had never to this point set a story in a law firm, and I spent 18 years in one. So I thought, put Beth in a law firm, ask what if her boss is dead, have her sister running out the door, and that's kind of the story just unfolded from there. I'm a pantser, so I didn't even know where we were going when I started, but it kind of went off into whole different directions, and I just went with it. I thought it worked at the end.
Yeah.
So.
You were exploring sisters. So it's interesting, though, that it's, first of all, it's told from Beth's perspective. So we get her viewpoint on the relationship, but also we don't see much of Lindsay because she's trying to figure out what's going on in this whole situation. And of course, we don't want to give too much away, but so we're not getting lots of scenes like with them together. So you're not exploring it in that way. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic?
Yeah, so you really do see Lindsay through Beth's eyes, that relationship, the frustration she had. But I think there are a couple of scenes where we see some backstory. And of course, Beth explains her emotions around different situations that they've been in, whether it was to cover for Lindsay in the past, or memories that she really desperately wants to recreate again when she can find Lindsay. Because Lindsay is MIA throughout the book. And I think that becomes at first an annoyance, like I'm going to figure out why she's running from this scene. Is she involved in this murder? Why is she talking to my boss? But then it becomes almost, is she not reaching out because she can't? And that it becomes more of a desperation for her to find Lindsay and to make sure that she's not, had something terrible happen to her related, because I mean the boss is dead and her father's telling her not to look for Lindsay, and all sorts of things are happening that just don't quite add up.
Yeah, nothing really is adding up. And her parents are not helpful in this situation. Again, we don't want to give too much away, but they're not acting
No.
like you would think they would.
Right.
As a pantser, do you know where the story's going to end up, or are you just kind of writing until you figure it out?
I'm usually writing until I can figure it out in many cases. In this particular one, I had an idea how I wanted it to end, but I will tell you that it did not keep that original ending. So sometimes, so where I thought it was going to end, I did end it, but I ended up going back in during the editing process and shifting things around, and it ended a slightly different, which I'm just as happy with. I think it could have gone either direction. I'm not going to give it away which direction it goes.
Of course.
But yeah, I think, I try to get out of the way of my characters and let them direct me which way to go. So I'm trying not to impose a lot of structure to them. And so I do follow along a lot of times. Sometimes I have to rein them in, and I'm like, well, that's not realistic, guys. We need to back up a few chapters and go forward again. But I'm just as surprised as my readers sometimes, the different layers. And then when I go back through different revisions, I add as well. So
yeah, makes sense. So the setting for you is familiar. It's in Portland. Also, the setting of the law firm is familiar. What about things that you needed to do a little bit more looking into? What research did you do for the story?
I didn't do a lot of research when it came to the law aspect of it. I mean, my sister is actually still in the legal field. So I did call her up a few times and say, hey, what computer system are you guys using now for research? How do you do things? Things have changed a lot over the years from when I did legal work. So, I had that resource. I also have a detective that I work with quite often who helps me with the details. Some of the aspects of family, DNA comes into play in this book, identity. So I did a little bit of online research for that type of aspect, but not a lot of deep part of it. I'm not a heavy researcher in the front end. I find few things that I need to double check, make sure they work. And I try to just kind of go with my imagination and then just tweak it enough to make it realistic. So.
So in terms of your writing process, I would assume rough draft, you just kind of get it out there, and then how much do you go back through before your editor sees it, or beta readers, or
Well, I don't really, I'm not one of those, what do they call it? Crummy, well, it'd be nice, not Cassier, crummy first drafts. I can't do that. I write, and then I go back and I read what I wrote and I go forward. So I'm always editing as I go, so that by the time I get to the end, it's more like a second or third draft, because I don't want to have to go back and then dismantle the whole thing and start over. That would just, be horrible for me. So I really try to fix things as I go. If something's not right or whatever, I'll do it at that point. And if I need to research something, I'll put it on the side a little bit. But that's why I was saying, if somebody goes off in a wrong direction, I can back it up, because I'm backing up 2 3 chapters and rereading forward. I also have I work with a book coach quite often who reads my pages weekly. I produce about 40 to 50 pages a week, and then I'll get that kind of feedback as well. And so that works really well for me. A lot of people do critique groups. I find having somebody that's just focused on my work only helps me keep moving at a fast pace, because I produce a book about it once every 3 months I can write. So, that's a little bit faster than most people have time to read for you. So I have somebody work with me.
Yeah, I just spoke with somebody a few weeks ago, and he wrote the entire book in third person, and normally he writes in first person, and he and his editor realized it didn't work, and he had to rewrite the entire thing in first person.
Yeah,
I had anxiety for him. So your smaller sections seems more manageable to me, but
yes. It's manageable. I think that's the key word. It's manageable, and then I don't feel overwhelmed by it.
Yeah. So backing up a little bit, let's go back to Beth as the main character, and what about her is going to resonate with readers, and what about her did you enjoy writing?
Yeah, well, I think, Beth is really like so many of us. We get up, we want to live our own lives, we want to go to work, we want to do a good job. Beth is very tenacious. She's a good girl. She shows up on Sunday breakfast with her parents, even though sometimes it drives her nuts, and she tries to be the good girl, knowing that Lindsay isn't always going to be the best daughter, as well. So she's not going to show up. So Beth has to show up. And she just cares a lot about creating her own world in her own way. And I think that's relatable. A lot of us want to kind of live life to the beat of our own drum. But something, of course, happens that turns all of that on her head. And then she's got to make a choice. Like, how much is she willing to come up against to save her sister or to find out what's happening? So I think, those kinds of dilemmas, even though extreme, not everybody hopefully will find their boss murdered at their place of work. I think we do a lot of times are forced to make decisions that sometimes we're not always prepared to make. And so she's relatable in that way, as she tries to balance what she knows is right and what her heart says, which is, I need to get to my sister and find out what's really happening. And I really like that about her. I liked her tenacity, and I really enjoyed writing that as I went through. I really liked her as a character, and I could relate to her because I spent 18 years in law, I could see her dilemmas and trying to balance, like, what do I do with this information? Do I turn my sister in? Don't I turn my sister in? But always coming up with a good reason, in her mind anyway,
Right.
why she was skirting that edge of what she knew was probably perceived by most people not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
So.
It's a standalone novel. Are you 1,000% sure it's a standalone? I feel like there was a little bit of a wiggle room there at the end that maybe.
Yeah, there is some wiggle room at the end. I did leave some unanswered questions that I could definitely go into another book. When I finished this book, I did feel like it was complete. Her arc was complete. That said, she's a paralegal and her sister's an investigative reporter. They could go far and wide doing all sorts of investigations, and things could come up. So I'm not going to say never, but at the moment I'm working on some different things. And so I would be coming back to it. I just wasn't inspired at that moment to continue the story, but that doesn't mean I won't.
Maybe they could make an appearance in one of the other, because, similar areas for some of the stories. So you never know.
You just never know.
I'm just randomly throwing your characters into different books.
You never know where they'll show up, these people.
Yep. Leave it to me to just take characters that I like from one book and say, hey, you can put it into this other book. Go ahead. I'm not the author. I'm just making random suggestions for you to obviously not take, unless you were going to do that anyway. But yeah, I am writing my own fanfic or something. I'm not really sure what that was about. But let's go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, we're going to be talking about what Mary is currently working on. So stay tuned. You are listening to and are watching the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with Mary Keliikoa. Before the break, Mary was talking about this being a standalone novel. I was asking if there was any possibility of returning to this world or these characters, and it's not without the realm of possibilities, but this was initially meant to be a standalone novel. Let's go ahead and return now to the conclusion of this conversation with Mary. So what have you been working on now?
Well, the third book in my Misty Pines series is going to be published in September of 2025. So I am almost to the end of that. I'm at the 2/3 mark and heading towards the finish line. So I'll be finishing that. And then I'm starting work on what I call my assassin book. But it's my first book that I'm going to put in Hawaii. And it centers around a sanctuary for trafficked girls. So a healing place, a sanctuary for when they come out of that. So I'm just starting to do some thinking on that direction.
Will you have to, unfortunately, go do research and go to Hawaii? I mean, that would be terrible.
Probably. It would just be horrible to have to go to Oahu and, and tour the island once again. Yeah, no. Luckily, I live with a Hawaiian gentleman, so I have, a resident expert at all times and lots of aunties and sisters that I can reach out to and get information as I need to. So
yes.
I'm very excited about that project.
So Oahu, is that the island it will take place on?
Yeah, that and the Big Island, I believe, and even some touching into Oregon because trafficked girls unfortunately get moved all sorts of places.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I always like to know, what have you been reading?
Well, right now I'm actually reading Your Dark Secrets by Elmar. I'm going to be interviewing her next month at a bookstore. So I am doing some research on that. And let's see Diane Freeman just had a brand new one come out with Art Lover's Guide to Paris and Murder, just came out. So I have that in hardback, and she just mailed me a copy. So I'm getting ready to read that one. So those are my latest.
Preferred reading, hardback, digital, paperback? What do you like, or just everything?
I really like everything. When I'm on my treadmill, I have my iPad, so my Kindle. When I'm on a plane, a lot of times I'll read with a book, or I like if I'm out on my deck, I like a book. But sometimes when I'm walking, I'm listening to audio. So and my book is out on audio, so that's been kind of fun to listen to that on audio, and just being able to do that on the move has been good. So really, I don't have a preference so much. It's wherever I'm at the moment.
Situational. The current book is on audio. Is the
Don't Ask, Don't Follow is an audio, Kindle, and paperback.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, standard question of internet and social media, website, and any social media that you're active on so people can find you.
Yeah, so the best place to go is my website, marykeliikoa.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I send something out about every 2 to 4 weeks, usually a giveaway and always something relevant to what I'm doing and that type of stuff. But also Facebook, Mary Keliikoa author, and Instagram, same thing, Mary Keliikoa author. And those are kind of my most preferred social medias.
Okay.
You can find those links too from my website. So
sure, makes sense. Is there anything that we haven't covered? I'm trying to think if there's anything that I had wanted to ask about the book, but is there anything that you can think of that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure you brought up?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered everything.
Well, that's good. So I wanted to say thank you for joining me for what I think is your third time on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thank you once again to Mary for joining me, not for the third time, but for the fourth time. I think that puts her in first place for the most appearances on the podcast, which is awesome. So thank you, Mary, for that. Again, if you want to check out some of her other interviews, you can go find those. Those were before we switched to video, so those will only be on audio, but wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can find the interviews with Mary. Again, those dates were October 26th, 2021, November 25th, 2022, and October 31st, 2023. And you can hear more about the series that she mentioned at the beginning when she was talking about what else she writes. If you are a fan of not scary thrillers and suspense, then Mary is a great one to turn to. Not only does she have those series, if you like reading series, but she has this now standalone book as well, which I really enjoyed. Liked the concept, liked the twists and the turns, and I actually had to ask her a couple of questions after we were done recording because I didn't want to give anything away, but I wanted to know what was that other ending that she had already written, and how could she have done X, Y, and Z? That was crazy. So I do like to get to ask authors questions about books that I have read. It's a fun perk of interviewing them. Can't always share that though with you because I don't want to give things away. It's a suspense, it's a thriller, it's a mystery. You have to read through it to find the answers yourselves. But definitely check out Mary's series, as well as Don't Ask, Don't Follow. If you have someone in your life who you're looking to buy a book for and they like this type of book, then definitely a good one. You can start them off with the standalone, and then maybe they'll want to go read the series as well. As we move on, I want to encourage you to join me for the next episode when I will be speaking with Kimberly G. Giratano. I'm going to double check how to say her last name because I think I probably just butchered it. But this is Devil in Profile. It is the second book in her Billy Levine mystery series. Billy is a private investigator in New Jersey, and she has found herself in the middle of quite the mess. But it involves art. It involves stolen art. It involves a lot of different things that she probably shouldn't be wrapped up in, but I'm looking forward to speaking to Kimberly about not only Devil in Profile, but the series as well. So please join me for that interview next week. And we're sticking in that suspense mystery category. That'll be 4 in a row, which is fun. As you know, that's not always been my preferred reading genre, that, suspense, thriller, etc. Mysteries, yes, but not less on the suspense side. So having 4 in a row has been really fun for me to get to not only read them for myself, but then share them with you, different kinds of suspense / thrillers / mysteries, however you want to describe them. It has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Thank you again to Mary for joining me for the interview. If you are a fan of this podcast, a couple things that you can do, of course, like, follow, and subscribe wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. That helps the algorithm. Also, leaving a review, a positive review, please, if I can ask. Leaving a review really, really helps that algorithm as well, helps the podcast and the network, gets this podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Finally, you can follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Love hearing from you. You can find more content and updates on social media, but I also love hearing from you. So go and leave the podcast, and by extension me, a comment. Tell me what you've been reading. Tell me what's on your TBR. Tell me all of those details that I am always being nosy and asking about. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great week. I hope that if you are doing something for the 4th of July, it is fun, it is safe. Please be safe. But if you're like me, I hope that your 4th of July involves not only food, family, fireworks, potentially, but plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much. I will talk to you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to